You scared?
Bloodrayne is a hack-and-slash game released in 2002 by Terminal Reality for the PS2, Xbox and PC.
This isn't working.
It was then later updated and re-released in 2020. For fucking everything, you could play this on your toaster. It received fairly good reviews at the time and was arguably one of the more successful games Terminal Reality would ever produce. So why review this 20-year-old game now? Well, Lord knows I have the time, and with the re-release I wanted to revisit one of my favourite games. To be clear, I am playing the re-released Terminal Cut version in the footage, which besides visual improvements and high resolution support, is the exact same game. I remember the adverts for Bloodrayne back in the day because her boobs were pretty much everywhere you looked. The game combined several of my favourite things: sexy vampires, the occult, and killing Nazis. I grew up on a diet of Indiana Jones and Buffy. Suffice it to say, the game appealed to me. Bloodrayne was one of those rare instances where the sexually charged marketing wasn't totally out of place. But for me, the appeal was more about the idea of playing a vampire. Back then, there weren't too many games that let you play as a vampire, at least not action games. Nowadays, you're tripping over them, there's bloodsuckers everywhere. Holy shit, it's like the zombie craze all over again.
Weep my ass.
Now, strictly speaking, Rain is a half vampire. And I'm mentioning that right now just so you know that for brevity's sake, I'm going to refer to her as a vampire. It's like referring to someone as half-sister all the time. It's awkwardly specific. Nobody would do that.
Just like your half-sister.
And with that, let's move on to the gameplay and how we're introduced to the combat. I can think of loads of games with good tutorials that are worked into the game thematically. Hell, I've reviewed 2 of them. Dragon's Dogma and Bayonetta had fantastic tutorials and game introductions. The tutorial for Bloodrayne is, well, it's functional. It's absolutely functional in the sense it tells you what the standard gameplay will be and which buttons do what. It has one of the main characters demonstrate for you and then you do it. It's okay, but it feels very tacked on after the fact and with on-screen text pop-ups. Unfortunately, the tutorial takes place in the first location of the game, and you don't know why you're there until you start chapter 1. So it's a bit jarring to already be there for the tutorial and then magically arrive again by boat. On the other hand, it's short, to the point and entirely optional, and this I fucking love. The gameplay is so simple, even a video games reviewer could do it. Probably. Left click to start swiping with your blades, right click to start firing your guns. That's it, honestly. There are no combos, only chaining attacks together, and Rain locks onto enemies with guns, so there's no need to aim. It's a button masher and proud of it. Rain will rotate through moves as you attack, and your attacks will increase in damage the further down the chain you go. You can also launch a jump attack into enemies, which is nice. Your enemies don't just take damage when they get hit. There is a locational damage system which for 2002 is beyond impressive. Sometimes you'll knock the weapons clean out of their hands, but other times bits of them will fly off. You can slice the legs off bugs and straight up cut people in two. People without limbs will crawl around on the floor. Different bits of their skulls will get sliced, and it all feels like it connects with the blades. Some enemies will be capable of shielding against Rain's blade attacks, and you'll need to either weaken them with repeated attacks, damage them from behind, or just shoot the shit out of them. Unlike the guns, Rain seems to only soft lock on with the blades, so positioning is still important, which I like. The challenge is in manoeuvring around your enemies, avoiding their gunfire and closing the distance so you can take them out. As you attack with blades, you'll build Bloodlust, and you can activate this to gain a great boost to your melee damage, as well as perform different combos and move faster. What I like about Blood Rage is you can deactivate it early, saving the meter for when you really need it. As you defeat significant targets, you'll unlock additional attack moves both in and out of Blood Rage. The gunplay is satisfying despite its simplicity. There's no recoil or anything like that, of course, but what makes it feel good is that guns are treated more as toys.
It's not a toy. It's a model built to scale.
You pick one up, fire it until it runs out of bullets, and then throw it away. You'll find another one soon enough. I mean, there's as many guns as there are Nazis, right? So disposable are they that you don't even have a specific weapon select key. You switch between weapon groups from weakest guns like pistols and SMGs to heaviest guns like assault rifles and shotguns. Rain will just shoot whatever she has available until she's out.
Is this a private party?
You also have access to grenades and the special weapon category. When I see a weapon marked special in any game, I get a little smile. These are always good fun, usually requiring both hands, and can be shotguns built to kill dinosaurs, rocket launchers, or just a big fuck off machine gun. You have an unnaturally powerful jump that can easily scale entire buildings. It can also be morphed into a spinning kick, useful for prolonging a jump, smashing through doors or a solid stone wall, or for just being cool. Also, jumping primarily serves as a form of dodging, which is very important as enemies can really start to gang up on you, both stunning and hitting hard. And I'm absolutely gratified to say you can shoot while somersaulting to the side, even with heavy weapons. If you haven't yet seen the appeal of this game,
What's wrong with you?
then hold up, because there's more. Perhaps the biggest draw of playing a vampire is the ability to feed.
Dig in.
And Bloodrayne doesn't disappoint. Your only means of health regeneration is to feed on humans. No bandages, no ibuprofen, no Dr. Crusher, just bad guys. You can get close to any humanoid and leap onto them by tapping E to attach yourself to their neck. While doing this, your health will slowly go up until they die. While they're alive, however, you can use them as a human shield against gunfire, rotating around and even firing back. Although the aiming while in this mode is understandably just firing blind, so it's difficult to hit anything reliably. Give her a break, it's hard to take aim while you're sucking. You can attack from the front or the back, which is very important when you remember that some enemies can only be attacked from behind. If you've dealt damage to an enemy, they'll have less life to chow down on. But how do I get them alone for dinner? Well, some vampires may choose to seduce their prey through conversation and enchantment, but on the other hand, Raine's equipped with a fucking harpoon. Yeah, she doesn't give a shit about masquerade violations. When you fire the harpoon, it will briefly stun an enemy before bringing them in for a quick snack. Or you can cancel your lunch plans and just attack them once they're downed. I've got all my food puns out of the way in one paragraph so you can relax. It's often useful to draw an enemy out of a crowd, as it's easy for Raine to get overwhelmed despite the fact her blades cleave multiple targets. Raine also has a vampiric aura vision, just like most vampires. It combines night vision, enemy detection, and an objective marker all into one button. It will also show how much health an enemy has remaining. The greener they are, the bigger the snap. No, that was the last one. There is a problem though. You press button 3 to activate it, and you'd assume you'd press it again to deactivate it. But no.
Not this time.
In fact, the tutorial never explains how to switch it off. So I kept pressing 3 like an idiot until I eventually had a flashback to my youth and pressed 1. You have to switch back to your regular view, as in press 3 for aura sight and then 1 for your driving glasses. There is of course the obligatory slow-mo button called dilated vision. And it's not half bad actually. It's very useful in some boss fights and can make dodging projectiles both easier and more of a spectacle. In fact, this is probably in here thanks to stuff like Max Payne, The Matrix. But you know what? You can really have some fun with this, so I dig it. Eventually you unlock a sniper aiming eye, but it's so wonky, and unfortunately you're forced to use it a few times. If you have reservations about the simplistic combat, then you have to take a step back and look at the entire package. The goal of Bloodrayne is to make you feel like an unstoppable killing machine, moving from enemy to enemy like a graceful, acrobatic angel of death. It's how you use these tools to work your way through the levels that's fun. You're not invulnerable. In fact, you can quickly die when the enemies start pouring in, but you're given tools to deal with it. The Bloodlust attack can quickly clear whole squadrons. Your strong jumps mean escape is usually an option. You can go from on your last legs to full health if you can just get the jump on that last soldier. The fact that health can only be regenerated in combat is a great design choice because it forces you into gameplay. You have to play the game to keep playing the game. There's also a tactical element in leaving some soldiers alive, especially during boss fights, because you might need a bite to eat. That's not a pun, that's just what vampires do. I think one of the coolest moments was having a guy shooting down at me while I leapt up from the ground to the balcony and right onto his neck. Bloodrayne succeeds in empowering you so you actually feel like a vampire assassin. The game is divided into 3 chapters and many levels. The first chapter is highly linear. You're led along a literal cable from area to area. You're there to sort out spooky business with your associate. This means you have to destroy nests and rescue people.
Go.
You get more dialogue and story, and given a good chance to get used to the controls. The second chapter is split into two halves. The first being a wide open area with multiple levels linked up, designed to be backtracked through. You can go anywhere you want so long as it's open to you, and anything locked will most likely open up as you progress. The method of progression? Knock Nazis off your hit list. It turns from rescue mission in the bayou to freeform assassin let loose in a Nazi compound. And it's great. You're never out of people to hunt, and there's a joy in getting lost in the labyrinthine corridors. The second half of the chapter becomes more linear, and the game doesn't suffer for it. The upsides are there's more dialogue and special encounters to spice up the gameplay. However, it's around this point when you go deeper underground that you're introduced to a new enemy, and I have very mixed feelings about them. More on the Daymites later. The third chapter takes place in a massive ruined castle and combines the best of both worlds. The open expansive spaces of chapter 1 and the closed interiors with maze-like corridors of chapter 2.
Tell me you love me, honey.
The entire chapter feels like a war zone, with the Nazis facing off against feral vampires. The sun gradually sets with the tide tipping in the vampires' favour. All the while rain must scale cliffs and parapets, delving deeper into this ancient place of vampiric power. Without question though, they are my favourite levels, but way too short. Best of all, in this chapter Bloodrayne gets my stamp of approval for including mechanised walkers, and instead of forcing the player to blow it up, chooses the positive karma ending.
Oh yeah, what are those? I want one.
Thank you, Terminal Reality. Even Chewie knew to get inside the walker. How do more games not do this? Although, real talk, this segment is fucking difficult. You have to engage before they realise you're hostile and hope you manage to outlast all 5 other mechs. Look at my health here. Holy shit, I was flipping off the wall thinking I was gonna die.
Oh, I wish I could take that thing with me.
For 2002, the level design is really solid, a good combination of linear and branching design with enough set pieces to keep things interesting. They made good use of verticality in some spaces, which allows you to fully enjoy Raine's jump height. The enemy selection is good, but the mechanics on display are limited. The bugs are basically blade fodder, and most of the humanoids are functionally the same. There's little difference between a plague victim and a Wehrmacht soldier, besides the weapons they have access to. But the SS officers do have the parry ability, meaning you have to go in for the lethal piggyback. I'm not complaining about the humans being basic. Blasting through a whole army is part of the fun. I just wish there was more variation besides the additional jetpack troopers at the end of the game. I'm going to talk about a couple of enemies though. One of the primary enemies are the Daymites. These serpentine parasites are capable of attacking on their own, as well as taking over human bodies and using them as hosts. From a story perspective, I love them, but gameplay is a mixed bag. The host versions are kinda fun to fight. They're like souped up versions of the regular enemies, and you're not quite sure just how much is parasite, how much is human. Remember that cool harpoon attack they gave you? Yeah, it just flat out doesn't work on them. They're also resistant to most gunfire. Don't get me wrong. I think Raine's blades are the more satisfying weapon to use, but you're basically stripped of 2 methods of attack when fighting these enemies, and I don't think that's a good design choice, seeing as how there are hundreds of them. There's also the pure parasite form, which are self-propelled snake-like creatures. They take damage from bullets, but because they're so thin, your bullets almost always miss. They can also stunlock you quite badly, which is frustrating, as again, ranged attacks aren't a strong option. The only good things about the Daymites are that they make full use of the locational damage, having their legs and arms cut off and yet they keep going. They can function with no head for crying out loud. I think this is a great way to show off the dismemberment system on an enemy, and I really like that. The last one I want to mention are the ancient vampires.
We're just having a flat meeting upstairs.
These are vampires who call Castle Gstaad home, and in their isolation have evolved into perfect killing machines. Step aside, Demon Sperm, these are the inhuman enemies done right. They are tough and can inflict serious damage with their claws, which double as vampiric teeth. They move fast and can go down several times before they're really dead. You're able to feed on them, but the harpoon attack doesn't work on them. I wish there were more of these guys. The bosses are a little dated by today's standards and easily meltable if you know what you're doing, but I like them. They're fun, inventive in their design, and generally have a little bit to say before you cross them off your list. Special mentions are Commando. I really love this fight. He uses flashbangs to flee and reposition himself. He'll also scramble your aura vision while he does this, so you can't just instantly find him again. I really enjoy a boss that doesn't just throw himself at you, and he got me a couple of times. He is also smart enough to bring an entourage and won't engage in conversation no matter how much Rain taunts him.
You must be the mysterious Commando. I'm sorry, was I talking too fast?
Buffy Mengele, aka the Butcher, for being able to drop you into pits of daymites and being one of the few bosses that attacks as aggressively as Rain herself. However, what is disappointing is that all female characters share the exact same moveset as Rain. This obviously makes fighting them a little stale, but it makes sense when you fight the Butcher at least, because when you beat her, you unlock her spin kick move. And despite this moveset limitation, she definitely has mechanics to compensate for it. But due to the relative ease you can dispatch bosses with Bloodlust, you may never see her open her chute. But my favourite boss is the ultra-racist preacher, Von Blut.
I am a Thule high priest, not a preacher.
This fucking guy, I swear, he spends a minute talking in the most serious tone you can imagine before unveiling his minigun pulpit that runs on fucking rails. This is gloriously fun boss design. There's some clever mechanics for the time, and if Bloodrayne were made today, there'd probably be phases or at least more abilities. But for 2002, they're good, and you can easily overestimate yourself and get slapped. I'll chat about the twins later, I haven't forgotten them. A funny side note is that the promo shots make all the enemies look like total posers. More games need to do stuff like this today, I love this. It's great. The gameplay is simple yet satisfying, and the acrobatic combat is really something special. But the way the different systems work together is what elevates it beyond simple button mashing. Leaping onto a soldier to feed but failing to realise he just primed his grenade is a fatal mistake. But you've got the tools to jump off and backflip away, if you're fast enough. Struggling with an enemy probably means you're meant to have saved Blood Rage for this encounter, and you may have fucked yourself if you didn't. There's an unforgiving nature to the difficulty of the game, yet it feels fair because 50% of the enemies are health packs. It drives you to attack, to feed, to be aggressive. You have to be smart, not cautious. You're given the tools to destroy bosses in a few swipes, but that doesn't mean a few guys with guns can't take you out if you're not quick on your feet. But that's enough about the gameplay. I'm probably going to allude to it later on, like you might think about a show you used to watch, but for the most part it wrapped up years ago. We move on to the story and characters. The story of Bloodrayne is about as deep as you'd expect, but it's not without its charms. I'm going to spoil about half the story, so skip ahead to this time if you want to miss that. The opening cutscene introduces us to Rain, shows she's a half vampire who hunts vampires and that she's looking for her father. Two robed figures discuss her recruitment into the secretive Brimstone Society. We immediately cut to 1933, to the swamp town of Morton in Louisiana. Rain, now a member of the Brimstone Society, has been dispatched with her mentor, Mince. The town has a long history of bad voodoo, and now it's back, mutating the townsfolk into not quite human things and drawing hellbugs out of the ground. After saving some of the locals, you watch as they're all eaten and taken off to feed Big Mama. For fuck's sake. Including Mince. Mince is definitely dead because she's been swallowed whole. With Big Mama taken care of, Rain is driven to stab herself with a mysteriously glowing rib, and before she sleeps it off, a German man takes it back out of her. Cut to a few years later, and Rain gets the call to shut down a secret Nazi research base in Argentina. While she's there, she has orders to kill everything that moves.
And of course, kill Hitler.
But as Rain delves deeper into the bunker, things get strange. She starts to meet more esoteric members of the secretive Geigengaus group, a faction bent on using occult means to secure victory for the Nazis. Von Blut, the preacher with the fully automatic pulpit,
I am a Thule high priest.
He believes that the Atlanteans are his Aryan ancestors.
The greatest Atlantean leader, Beliar, was immortal.
Operations to recover the skull of Beliar have begun in earnest, to recover the last remains of their Atlantean king. They've been digging to find him, but he's not alone down there. They opened the door to the Damites, demonic parasites countless in number, capable of taking human hosts and coalescing into even greater horrors.
Very attractive.
For the average soldier, these spell death, yet there are those depraved enough to see them as weapons, or worse, as playthings.
No, please, Doctor, not me. No!
The Butcher, a descendant of Elizabeth Bathory, tells you that the Damites aren't defending anything. They aren't trying to stop them reaching the skull or even to rise up and conquer the surface.
They control the host body like a puppet, seeking extremes of pleasure and pain. Mostly the easier sensation wins out. Pain.
They're throwing themselves at the Nazis just to experience pain. I think I want to stop there with the story, to leave the rest unsaid. Honestly, it goes a bit downhill from here, but the sheer grimness of an entity that desires to feel pain, even at the cost of its own life, is wonderfully horrific. Bloodrayne's story is dark by 2002 standards.
I can see that.
There's a schlocky simplicity to it all. The plot points are tied together like a cheesy action movie, only with really provocative details. Besides Rain, every character in the game is barely important, I'm sad to say. The most present character is Mince, and she is essentially done in the first chapter. We get the impression she is both a friend and mentor, and a softer soul than Rain. I feel like Mince warranted a bit more screen time. It might have helped elevate the B-movie plot a little, to let the personal interactions grow a little more before turning them into motivations for revenge. So it's time to talk about the dark protagonist. The marketing for Rain is both on point, but also does her dirty. Most people would have seen the more well-marketed side of Rain. The dominatrix-style leather, the bit where she licks the blade, that Playboy photo. They've seen the obvious, flirty side. Now, sensuality is a classic part of the vampire mythos. The allure and sex appeal of a dangerous character. And Rain is all that. She's definitely playful and flirts with her victims.
Quiet, baby. What will the neighbors think?
What you didn't really see marketed was just how cold and bloodthirsty she could be. Rain is genuinely scary, and she should be. She derives a sadistic pleasure from hunting those who deserve it and delivering justice in the harshest way possible. And it's heavily implied she gets a bit of a sexual rush as well, especially from the fucking feeding noises she makes.
Get that off me!
Despite reveling in the bloodshed of others, Rain isn't evil. She actively seeks to save the innocent, and her human heritage clearly helps keep her in balance. It would have been really easy to have her be one flavour, the flirty vampire who laughs at dead bodies. She's outraged in equal measure at the murder of innocents, the depravity of the Nazis, as well as the loss of a friend.
I'll find those bastards and rip their legs off one by one.
But at times, she's downright sub-zero.
What are you doing?
What does it look like? I'm lowering the lift.
Stop the lift, please!
You really should pay more attention to safety. As you know, most accidents in the workplace can be prevented.
And the additional layers help shape up a more complex character, even with the schlocky B-movie story. Rain goes the entire game and only shows compassion to an enemy once. And now I talk about the twins. Simon and Sigmund Krieger were born conjoined. They still share a link, both mental and physical. As one feels pain, the other is injured. Killing one of the brothers will kill the other. The twins are the only bosses that reciprocate Rain's playful banter. They not only lament that they have to kill her, but they flirt in kind with the same dangerous edge.
You should stop this nonsense.
Enjoy now.
Are you talking about what I think you're talking about?
There is a different death scene for each brother, and upon killing Simon, Sigmund falls to the ground, where he makes one final request.
She never told me.
My brother would like to know your name.
It's Rain.
Pretty.
The little hints of humanity Rain shows is a big part of why I like this character. It would have been so easy to have her just reply with a one-liner like she has the rest of the game, to just cut his brain open and finish the job. But she knows her work here is done, and perhaps in this one instance, there's no need for ultra-violence, it's just time to let them die. Although, to be clear, they had to go because they were Nazis. I'm talking about Rain's human heart beating inside that cold vampiric exterior. And I checked, it is a beating heart because the Hampirs are born living, not dead. Checkmate, Giles. Rain is an interesting character, masquerading as an obvious one, and those are some of my favourites, which is why I gotta put her in the Hall of Fame. Composed by Tommy Tallarico and Kyle Richards, the latter of whom would go on to compose the sequel, the score of Bloodrayne feels very appropriate for the genre, theme and content. Each chapter has a distinct sound to it. Louisiana is spooky, the music is much filled with unearthly sounds as it is instruments. When the action does kick in, there's a more tribal sound to fit the theme of voodoo magic. The Argentina bunker theme slowly transitions through an infiltration beat to a faster assassination track, becoming more industrial the further you go. And then bam, you're hit with the Thule music, choirs kick in and the supernatural rears its head. This unnatural feeling grows as you progress deeper into the compound, but the rhythm quickens as the denizens grow more and more deadly. Then we hit Germany. Classical instruments and motifs reminiscent of older war movies. You can just hear the Nazi patrol rounding the corner. And then we get this banger. Every single track not only captures that emotion, but also the thematics of the setting it's played in. Some great music. The sound effects are exactly what the game needs to help put you into the action. The guns all sound heavy but not overwhelming. The clash of steel on flesh, metal and stone all gives off a satisfying crunch respective to each surface. The ambient sounds are plain eerie. And as for the enemies, okay, so as mixed as my feelings are about the Damites from a gameplay perspective, they absolutely nailed their intro.
Hello? Nazis want to come out and play?
After killing Nazi after Nazi, suddenly the bunker is empty. You're all alone, but you know you're not. Listen to that, and the sounds they make, the squirming and writhing, it's gross, I love it. The growl of the feral vampires, the moan of the mutates, they all work together with the ambience to create a classic horror setting for the action game. Laura Bailey nails the voice of Rain. She makes the switching between cold sarcasm, absolute fury and sadistic flirt feel totally believable. Her interactions with the various characters elevate the boss fights and turn the schlocky story into an enjoyable romp. She has a lot to say, and that's one of the highlights of the game. Best of all, Rain will throw out one-liners as she kills, and honestly, I love this, and I want more of this in games. They range from the obvious flirtatious stuff to pretty sick humour after taking off someone's head.
You dropped something.
A lot of the incidental enemy voices are repetitive, and of course all of the Germans speak heavily accented, but perfect English. But for the most part, the voice cast are fantastic. I'm gonna bring up Von Blut again, and you know it, whose unknown voice actor projects the weighty yet deranged conviction of a Nazi occultist.
I am a Thule high priest.
Mary Beth Brooks is great and brings a little warmth to Mintz, just enough to make her feel like the mentor of the Dhampir. And Damien Clark totally becomes the strange, infinite, and ancient Hedrox.
Hedrox wants the secret.
He'd later voice Handsome Jack, one of the best video game villains of all time. I think graphics are a really boring thing to judge a game on, so I'm doing visuals and spectacle, and that's how dazzling and interesting it is to me within the style of the game. Bloodrayne came out in 2002, and there's no denying it shows, but damn I think it looks good for its age. However, there are some technical complaints about the re-release. The UI textures were horribly blurry even back in 2002, and they have not been updated for the re-release, despite the increased screen resolution. Likewise, you can now play the game at mega ridiculous widescreen, if that's your thing and you have eyesight like a fucking velociraptor. However, the in-game HUD will not adjust for you, meaning Rain's health and powers wheel will always be stuck near the middle of the screen. Thankfully, Nexus user Nipcow has 2 mods to fix both these problems. These do not alter gameplay or anything, except changing the location and quality of the user interface, and I legitimately think at least the HUD placement mod is essential. Unlike my complaints and suggested fixes for Dragon's Dogma's visual problems, the shortcomings with Bloodrayne do not affect the overall visual or spectacle experience. So how does Bloodrayne hold up? They did a lot with what they had back then. Great quality textures, nice models and some good visual effects. The environments are simplistic in their level of detail, but not without character. The Nazi bunker slowly progresses from a labyrinth of concrete to a research lab and processing facility, further into a mine, all featuring spaces with distinct looks and layouts. Exploring the corridors of the Louisiana estate with ripped wallpaper and fading artwork while lightning strikes the foggy swampland outside. It's eerily beautiful to see the decaying antique furniture. A place that was once luxurious now as dilapidated as the wooden huts nearby. Again, Castle Gaustadt takes the lead. The snow-peppered mountains, the ruined walls, the ancient halls and beautifully Gothic statues and construction. The vast open exterior mountains lead perfectly into the castle that quickly becomes tight corridors and rooms before leading back outside again. This area also features the best boss arenas. Classic Gothic, a perfect setting for the game's ending. But the levels are sparse in their decor, and while you do run into richly detailed spaces, so many areas are just largely underdone. You'd be forgiven for thinking the lighting and shadows are new to the re-release, but no, they've just improved upon them. The shadow casting was there back in 2002. The lighting effects make the atmosphere ooze out of the levels. Also, most of the furniture is at least partially destructible. If you go into a room, then most likely 40% of it can be destroyed. And the stuff that does smash into pieces has a reasonably good physics system, so it all lands nicely on the ground. As for the rest of the game's physics, well, their heart was in the right place. Every enemy bleeds, and that blood goes on the floor, the walls, with varying degrees of splatter depending on the height and direction. It's something you can tell they put a lot of time into. When it comes to enemies, the quality is substantial, with the uniforms featuring a lot of detail. The faces aren't half bad for 2002. But get used to seeing the same few guys over and over. What I love about all of Bloodrayne's enemies is how even the supernatural ones look and feel grounded. There's a realness to them that feels bound in eldritch volumes more than floating about in sparkles and candles. The supernatural here is dark, bloody, and inherently evil. Alright, summary time. I'm wrapping up starting with the negatives because I want to end on a positive note. Having the final boss of the game be immune to your blade attacks is absolutely baffling to me. Raine's blades are her signature weapon. They're as much a part of her as anything else. Some of the more awkward platforming needed to go, as did anything encouraging the use of that sniper vision. They just don't feel like they belong in this game. Sometimes you feel like you can just fucking die for no good reason, or because an enemy completely stuns you in place with no hope of escape. And that's just not fun. The game is visually impressive in almost every way, but let down by large empty spaces between areas that clearly had more work put into them. But it makes up for it with amazing lighting, vicious blood decals, and lovely textures. The acrobatic gunplay that allows you to shoot at more than one target is one of the best parts of the game, and a perfect accompaniment to the blade attacks. Combined with a reasonable variety of environments, good enemies and bosses for the most part, and the best combat feeding system I've seen, leaves Bloodrayne being a blast to play through at least once. So, can I recommend Bloodrayne? Only to fans of action games, people who want to play an honest part of gaming history, or if you just love vampires. Any combination of those, and I know you'll enjoy it. But I meant what I said, it's enjoyable for at least once. The replayability is limited, and it's got plenty of flaws, but it makes up for it with style, brutality, and personality. It's a reminder of less complicated times, so it holds a special place in my heart. They released a Bloodrayne side-scroller called Betrayal. That got a re-release as well. I've heard good and bad things about it, but I haven't played it because I'm not great at those sort of games. Ziggurat games have, appropriately, risen terminal reality from the dead, it seems. The Bloodrayne re-releases herald perhaps a future for Raine, and I'm hopeful she gets another game. I always felt like she had at least one more adventure to go, but who knows how long we'll have to wait for Bloodrayne 3.
Wait my ass.
However, there is already the sequel, so maybe one day I'll tackle the second game. But for now I can safely say there is nothing left to say about Bloodrayne. Oh, fuck. Fuck's sake, I forgot about the shitty fucking movie.
It's part of my plan. I am tiring you out.
Simon and Sigmund Krieger were both born conjoined. Well, I mean, they'd have to be, wouldn't they? They'd have to both be born conjoined.